Ever since 4.1 has dropped, the light fighter community has been whinging and crying about the Polaris pretty much non-stop. They are calling the ship oppressive, which is, I think, the new emotional buzzword that people are using now when they're trying to manipulate somebody into changing something they don't like. They complain about its respawn capability, because I guess in Star Citizen, people are just spawning out of these things in the hundreds and running at them non-stop. They even complain about the PDCs and how they shoot down torpedoes and missiles, and also actively engage their ships when they're attacking the Polaris. And to me, the ultimate irony of all this is whenever they complain about the Polaris, quote-unquote, locking their ships out of content, basically saying that they cannot bring their Hornet or some other type of single-seat fighter to some type of PvP activity because the Polaris locks it down. And the irony from that statement comes from the fact that for years, absolute years, before any capital ships were ever in the game, the light fighter just locked down every other form of content. So much like how the light fighter players are complaining now, it was just one class of ship that was locking people out of content back then. And to be even more specific, it was the Gladius and in some cases the Arrow under the older flight model. The common complaint is that the Polaris is overpowered and just cannot be stopped. It's the ultimate quote-unquote Bob-mobile. The idea is that a solo, casual bad gets in his thing, or maybe he loads it full of Scribinis and they fly out together and do something, and they're nearly invulnerable to your average ace pilot or player who is, let's be real here, better than him at the game. In a way, it's almost acting like a bad force multiplier. But what if I told you that that's all BS? That the Polaris actually sucks? What if I told you that I will never ever fully crew a Polaris, nor will I use it as a mobile respawn point? It's simply underpowered. It's worthless. And I do not want to load one full of players when this can happen. What you saw there in all of those clips was me, by myself, taking out a Polaris in an A1. And in one of those clips, you saw the remnants of every single Polaris that I alone killed in one engagement when fighting against another org. We were not fighting against casual bads who were showing up just to quote-unquote experience the content. We were fighting up against people who were there to fight and to win. There was absolutely nothing that those Polarises could do to stop me. Even if they were fully crewed, which some of them were, the end result would be the exact same. I would fly in with an A1. I would do my best impression of a P-47 in War Thunder. I would drop my bomb and pull up, and I would, all by myself, take out a multi-crew capital ship. In the current state of the game, you may say this is fine and that this is a valid tactic. And to a degree, you would be correct. But I want to ask you a few questions. The first is, why are players soloing Polaris? Why are they not filling them up with multi-crew? It's not because engineering or quote-unquote multi-crew isn't in the game yet. It's because the experience of being in a turret or firing the torpedo or whatever else it is on that ship sucks. I want you to go get into a Polaris, and I want you to sit into those turret seats, and I want you to try and effectively gun against something other than a stupid NPC. It is an unenjoyable, annoying, and quite frankly, underperforming experience. Have you ever played another game where turrets simply do not work? They're not functional, they're not effective. They don't even perform how you would think. If turrets are not worth being in, then the people who own the Polaris are not going to crew them. They're going to fly it by themselves and try to ram things, or just be annoying. The second question I would ask you, especially those of you who think that me flying an A1 and annihilating a Polaris immediately is okay, I would ask you then, what is the point of the Ion? What is the point of the Inferno, the Eclipse, the Retaliator, or any other quote-unquote anti-capital ship? There simply is not one, because the A1 Spirit, which is an air-to-ground bomber, is somehow better at taking out these ships. Also, the next question I would ask you is, do you really think that one ship should have the capability of instantly destroying or disabling a multi-crew capital ship? The answer should be no. Otherwise, you get what you have now, which are people either solo crewing them or not using them at all. People will often like to complain that there is no counter to the Polaris, that it's just simply not in the game. Well, there is, and it should not be the A1. The counter to the Polaris is, or should be, another fully crewed Polaris. But we've already covered why people are not fully crewing them, and when they do, they're really not that much more effective anyway, so that's the problem. The second is, why aren't people using the Ions and the Infernos in mass? No, I do not expect one Ion or one Inferno, or one Retaliator or one Eclipse or anything like that to be able to counter a capital ship. But in mass, they absolutely should. But people are not doing that. And they're not doing that because it's easier to use an A1 bomber to disable the ship. And the final thing about all this, and this is the absolute funniest to me, is you heard on the forums from the people complaining and crying about Tier 0 respawns ruining the game and being zerged and all that. And a common complaint or a common example cited was the Polaris. Yet here we are, where one bomb will disable the Polaris, basically effectively killing it. Now, I know one of those smart guys out there is going to say, although you can still respawn on the medbed when the power plants are destroyed. That's not a reason to get rid of Tier 0. As far as I'm concerned, the ship shouldn't function at all if the power is off. That includes the medbed. Simple fix. It's not a Tier 0 issue. But for people saying that the Polaris was going to be a Tier 0 Zerg machine, this video just proves that those people have no idea what they're talking about. And of course they don't know what they're talking about, because the majority of the Star Citizen community suffers from the most intense case of Dunning-Kruger I have ever experienced in online gaming. They will lie, they will make up stories, they will conjure up narratives, and they will use emotion to try and convince you or others that their point is correct. But I'm going to do a whole nother video about that and Tier 0, because I've got a lot of really good footage and examples of Tier 0 in action, and I've also been testing it, and all this fear-mongering about Zergs coming out and wiping things, totally nonsense. Anyway, that's the video. The Polaris, it sucks. I'm sorry. People saying this thing is overpowered, learn to play, get good, or whatever it is you say. And if you're into Polaris and you're getting bombed, hire an escort, I guess, is what they say. Or just get another single-seat ship like everybody else, because that's what CIG must apparently want you to do. Thank you for watching. Hit me up in the comments.